This is the base for the Warhammer Space Marine Stormspeeder that I had mentioned in a previous vlog. And I've gotten, as I mentioned, I've gotten where I really like using these contrast paints for this because it's fairly quick, it's fairly easy, and it looks pretty good. It's one of those products that I think the results that it gives you are better than the effort that you put into it. They because of the way they work, they're not a wash. The way they're designed to work, if you haven't heard, is Citadel designed them so that you could take a mini and base it in a very light color, and then put some of these contrast paints over it, and it would pull down into the recesses, kind of pull away from the highlights, color the flat areas, and leave you with some shading and some highlights and a base color. The idea being that you can paint stuff faster, get it on the tabletop faster, and have it, painted and looking reasonably good. Some guys like Juan Hidalgo have taken it to the next level, where they actually paint models with these contrast paints, then use regular paints to do various highlights and things like that, and paint them to a very high standard. So they're very useful, and I like using them. But my plan is to do the base, the groundwork in this Agaros Dunes, which is kind of a reddish brown. I may mix in a little Skeleton Horde, either mix it with it, do some wet blending, put it in other areas. I'm not really sure, but this is more of a brown. So that'll be the ground area. Then the rocks I'm going to do mostly with this contrast Basilicanum Gray, which will leave, it should give, with this gray base to it, it should give a nice dark granite kind of feel to it. The grass tufts, I'm going to put this Plague Bearer flesh on. I may grab another green paint or something like that to make it work. But I really like using these because they are just fairly quick, fairly easy, and unlike Army Painter's speed paints, they dry. When I'm mixing any Citadel paints, I always use my stir tool. That way it mixes it up thoroughly, but it doesn't get paint up in around the lid and gunk it up, which makes it hard to open the lids, and is also why many people experience their Citadel paints drying up prematurely. Now, normally I don't go straight from the paint pot, but for this purpose, I just go ahead and get plenty of paint on the brush and just start putting this on there. Now, I'm going to generally avoid painting the grass tufts and the rocks. If I get some on there, I'm not going to sweat it. I'm not going to, go back and try and color correct it, because in the end it'll all blend together nicely and look the part. But you can see how it's just right off the bat, it's giving me some highlights, like if I had dry brushed it. It's giving me some shadow, like if I had put a shade in it. But it's also coloring everything. So it's a really great product to use. And you can go back, like if I wanted in certain areas, I could go back and put in additional colors over it. I could put in additional layers to darken it even more, to add tonal variation. If I got really motivated, I could start wet blending some stuff into it. So in some ways, it's not a paint, but in other ways, it works a lot like a paint in that you can do those things, the wet blending and things like that. So if you've not used it, I think, especially for applications like this, or for quickly painting figures, especially if they have some texture on them, this is a great way to go. Now, my intent is not to paint like the rocks and things like that, but because some of these rocks are really small, if there are any that I do paint and I don't want them to have the brown undertone, because these are transparent, anything I put over them is the undertone is going to show through. So if there are any rocks that get painted that I think, okay, I don't want that undertone to show through, then what I'll do is I'll just get some Vallejo Sky Gray and just touch up the little rocks and reset them to this light gray color. And then I can put more contrast paint over it. And it works quite well that way. All right, now that I've got that Agaros Dunes applied, I'm going to put in some Skeleton Horde, and I'm just going to wet blend this right into it. It's not going to be a huge difference. It's one of those that you go back and you wonder, was it really worth it? But I think just a little bit of tonal variation, darkening up a few areas, are really just going to help give it some variety and some contrast. Not the paint, but the term contrast. Just going to help give it a little bit of variety. And you can, once this dries, you can always go back over it, touch it up with more contrast paint. You can touch it up with some dry brushing, some traditional painting. So there's nothing that says that, you can't go back with paint over it. Which, again, not to keep flogging the same horse, but that was my chief complaint about the speed paints. If you're working like this and you want to just let it dry for 30 minutes and then put some paint back over it, you can't. And that's a big deal. So I really like this, but I'm just going to let this get on here and let that dry and just give it a little bit of variation. But you see how, even when it's wet right now, just single coat of those contrast paints really makes it look like dirt. So I really like this product. Now I'm going to use some of this Basilicanum Gray to just go over the rocks like this. Now, when you're applying these, I think it works best to apply them kind of heavy and then go back and wick up any that you don't want to be so heavy. So it just kind of depends on what effect you're trying to get, how heavy you put it on there. But I think where a lot of people ran into problems early on when these were released is they tried to put it on in very thin coats. And it just doesn't work as well that way. But if you put a heavy coat on and then begin distributing it around the model and then wicking it up where it's, where you don't want it, it dries much smoother and gives you a much better result. But look at that. It just very quickly gives a very nice appearance of rocks. I really, really like this stuff. Have I mentioned that I like it? Now I've got the rocks painted in. I'm going to use this Plague Bearer Flesh and just start applying this to the grass tufts. Now you have to kind of work this in because they're if you think about it, they're basically giant frayed paint bristles. Frayed, F-A-R-Y-E-D. F-A-R-Y-E-D, not afraid, but frayed. Which reminds me of the joke. This piece of string goes into a bar, and the bartender says, "Get out of here. We don't serve your kind here." And he says, "You don't serve strings?" And he goes, "No, we don't serve strings." So the string leaves. Goes outside, tussles up his hair a little bit. He comes back in. The bartender says, "Hey, didn't I tell you we don't serve strings in here?" And he says, "No, I'm afraid not." Get it? Anyway, yeah. Don't worry. I'm not going to become a comedy channel because there's no comedy. Anyway, you just have to kind of work it a little bit and get this in here. I'm okay if it goes down onto the brown areas because, again, it just looks like maybe little places, patches of grass that are growing that are very small. It can look like, mold or mildew or fungus or something like that. But I'll just keep working this in and let it dry. And once it dries, I'll give it a look over and do it again if it needs it. One of the things I also do is once I get this on there, I can go back and grab some of the brown base colors and kind of blend that in because they take long enough to dry that I can blend that in if there's a little more than I want at the border of the grass and the dirt and get that blended in. Now, another thing I may do when it dries, I haven't decided yet, is I may dry brush the grass with a little brighter green. I'm trying to decide if I want it to look really dead, like it's, you know, just barely hanging on there in the desert, or if it's, you know, maybe there's been some rain and it's sprung to life. I'm not sure how I want to make that look, but I'm going to go ahead and get this stuff applied and see what I end up with. All right, I've hit it with a hairdryer for just a couple of minutes, and I'm good with it like it is. I'm going to give it 24 hours to dry, and come back and touch up any gray areas that I may have missed. Also, we'll go in and paint the rim of the base, probably black or something like that, but maybe a dark brown, who knows. That doesn't really matter. But you can see, and even though this video is going to be, well, with editing, I'm not sure how long it'll be, but it's going to be, you know, 12, 13, 14 minutes. Total time this took me, camera on, camera off, is under half an hour, probably about 25 minutes to do this whole thing. So that's the whole purpose behind contrast paint, is to allow you to get something that looks reasonably good in a fairly quick amount of time. And like I said, I really like especially how it looks when you apply it over dirt areas. Now, I could have used contrast medium. I had it standing by in case I wanted, and this lets you just thin those out so that you can build up layers and build up opacity and things like that. I could have done more, certainly, with this. I could, you know, I could go back later and do some dry brushing if I wanted. Who knows? I may do that, but right now my plan is just to leave it like it is. I'll see how it looks in a couple of weeks, and if, you know, if it grows on me, I'll leave it. If not, I may add some stuff. But again, really simple, just using, and I only used a little bit of skeleton horde, and now that I'm looking at it, it's hard to even tell where I used it. So essentially, 3 colors. But because of the way contrast paint works, I've got shadow, I've got highlight, I've got base color, I've got some tonal differences built into it. So it's really quick, it's really simple, and that's why I like it, because you know, the focus of this, of when I build the flyer that this goes on, the focus of the video will not be the base. I don't even know that I'll mention the base, other than to say, you know, at the end, you know, here it is, and just the fact that it's sitting on the base, and just may not even mention that. It does dry, just a quick note, I thought of this, it does dry with just a little bit of a satiny finish, so if you want it to be a little more matte, just hit it with a coat of matte varnish, rattle can or airbrush. I don't know that I would brush on matte varnish. I've never tried it, but it might, because that goes on a little thicker, it might clog up some things, but you know, hey, if you want to give it a try, give it a shot. But I hope you've seen that these contrast paints can be a real powerful tool to give you a really quick but good-looking result without a lot of time and effort being expended. So I'll call this vlog done. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.